Support for Sustainability Defined comes from NLX, the makers of Juicebox, the best-selling electric car home charging station. The Juicebox smart charger enables EV drivers to charge their cars with the cleanest and cheapest energy available. More online at juiceboxstore.com.
Brew Dr. Kombucha is committed to helping people discover how good kombucha can be. Their refreshing, authentic kombucha is made from 100% organic ingredients, and the company is proud to be a certified B Corporation. Check out Brew Dr. Kombucha, that's brewdrkombucha.com to learn more. All right, listeners, welcome back to Sustainability Defined, where Scott and I are here defining sustainability one topic and one bad joke at a time. This episode is a little bit different, Scott. In fact, it is Atypical episode number 1. On this Atypical episode, our very first, we are discussing a couple things. Number 1, racial justice. Number 2, some favorite sustainability articles we're sharing. And 3, some listener voicemail. So a little bit different here.
Right. And so, Jay, you and I, we wrote this statement. It's kind of on the longer side, so we'll say it. But, Jay, we're also going to put it on our website, right? So if people want to read it there, they can as well.
Exactly. So, Scott, let's get rolling.
Okay. So the killing of George Floyd and the protests across the United States have shined a light on a system that continues to explicitly and implicitly disadvantage people of color. The world is demanding change. Jay and I have been doing a lot of thinking since the onset of these events. We've been thinking about how we grew up, who we associate with and listen to, how we've run this podcast over the last 4 years, and crucially, how we benefited from this system. The reality is that we're part of the problem, because while we may not consciously take actions against people of color, we also have not been conscious of the racist system we are operating in, nor have we taken action against it. Exhibit A of that is that if you look back at our 51 episodes, not one has been with a black person, and frankly, our lack of self-awareness and anti-racism is embarrassing.
So then we ask ourselves, how did we get to this point? Well, we think, as is likely with probably many white people, we simply didn't think about the issues of race all that much. The people we associate with, the people we see on TV, the people running our government are all mostly white. And the prevailing, often unspoken thinking was, as long as we don't act like or amplify the voices of white supremacists who say black people are inferior, then we're good. But we are not good. We need to be aware of and actively fight against the segregation in our cities that leads to people like us growing up with few people of color in our schools. We need to fight against popular entertainment that perpetuates racial stereotypes. And we need to fight against the institutions that do not take enough active steps to have their leadership reflect the rich tapestry of our nation.
It's increasingly obvious that social justice and environmental justice are inextricably linked. Jay and I recently read an article in the Washington Post by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson entitled, "I'm a Black Climate Expert. Racism Derails Our Efforts to Save the Planet." She explains that racism, injustice, and police brutality are also pernicious because of the brain power and creative hours that they steal from black people. She wanted to be writing her policy memo to members of Congress on accelerating offshore wind energy development in U.S. waters, the introduction to her book on climate solutions, and other sustainability projects. But instead, she feels compelled to write this article. She says, "I think of one black friend of mine who wanted to be an astronomer, but gave up that dream because organizing for social justice was more pressing. Consider the discoveries not made, the books not written, the ecosystems not protected, the art not created, the gardens not tended." She makes a good point. Jay and I have not had our brainpower taken up too much with the issues of race. It's probably part of how we were able to start this podcast, and also how we would say, we really need to have a black person on the show, but then have our minds wander to other efforts.
So what are we going to do about it? Most immediately, a couple things. One is that on our website, we have put a bunch of articles on environmental racism, the intersection of climate change and racism, environmental justice, and other areas where sustainability and racism intersect. We are reading these articles in preparation for an October episode that will focus specifically on racism and sustainability. During that episode, we will discuss several organizations working this issue, and any advertising dollars that we receive for that October episode will be distributed among those organizations. We are also going to be more thoughtful about who we bring onto the show for interviews. We, of course, want engaging, informed guests, but also ones that reflect diverse perspectives, especially those that do not typically have the opportunity to come on a show like this. Beyond interviewee selection, we also need to be mindful of the outlines we create for the interviews themselves. We need to recognize that the conversations we outline are the products of two white men with similar backgrounds, and ensure that we do not miss important elements that may not occur to us immediately.
And the same goes for our intro notes. Sometimes this may involve Jay and I taking the time to reflect on if we're missing anything, or seeing if there are any articles we can read with different perspectives to inform our substance. Other times it may involve asking someone from a different background to read over our planned content or to give us their opinion on a topic. Up to this point, Sustainability Defined has been a labor of love for two white privileged men who didn't think nearly enough about ensuring diversity in the content or the interviewees. We promise to be better in our approach to try to offset the inherent deficiencies that come with two hosts of a similar background.
So listeners, how can you help? Well, tell us when we failed to live up to these ideals. We recently had a listener email us to say, I loved your career episode, but what if the person listening is from a disadvantaged background and can't do the kind of in-person networking you mentioned? And what if the person is a minority? What should they be aware of as they go about trying to find a career in sustainability? Those questions hadn't even crossed our minds. We admittedly gave our best advice from our personal experience, which is one of many resources and one of being in the majority, both in U.S. society and in this profession. We've gone back and added resources related to these questions to our website page for the Careers in Sustainability episode. So listeners, feedback like this is incredibly helpful. You can also send us topics we should cover, people we should interview, or articles we can read that will open us and our listeners up to needed underrepresented perspective. As always, you can reach us at hosts, HOSTS, at sustainabilitydefined.com with these points and any other suggestions or feedback.
So our plan is to keep listening and reading, to be more conscious of how we run our podcast and of the broader system in which we operate, and to act so our podcast and honestly our lives more generally reflect and advance a more diverse, aware understanding. We hope you'll stick with us. We want your help, and we want to grow along with you. Thanks for listening.
All right, so Scott, that statement, of course, can't describe enough how important that is. I think we're both glad we said it, and of course, we're excited to act on that going into the future. Let's now branch into, of course, the second part of our Atypical episode number 1, which is some of our favorite sustainability articles of late. So, if you don't mind, I might just kick us off real quick.
Hop into it, Jay, and I'll ask questions and give my hmms and as you read.
So this first article I'd like to share is actually closer to news, Scott. You know, we do almost like investigative reporting. This is closer to news. So this is an article from Axios from June 30th, 2020 called 6 Takeaways from the House Democrats' Climate Blueprint. So Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives unveiled a 547-page document that details their overarching climate agenda with direct ties to racial justice. The Axios article does a good job of distilling the body of this massive 550-page document into something you can actually read in a few minutes. We encourage you to read the full article, but my two favorite takeaways are the following. Number 1, the strategy emphasizes the nexus between pollution and racial inequalities, which I think, of course, for a lot of people has been an obvious fact for a long time. But of course, there's a broader reawakening here that I was happy to see this blueprint reflect. And then number 2, The blueprint highlights climate-friendly energy investments as part of the response to the coronavirus economic fallout. Talking about the economic opportunity there that I think a lot of us sense, but it really spells that out. So for those of you bookworms who do want to read the full report from the House Select Committee on the climate crisis and want to plow through 547 pages, check out climatecrisis.house.gov.
It sounds like a very timely document, Jay, given current events, but I think another thing to watch is how that blueprint is going to influence Joe Biden's platform and what he is calling for. So that'll be interesting to see play out as well.
Right. And the article does make reference to the Green New Deal, of course, which I think it sees as even farther left. So I think you bring up a good point, which is how are all these climate plans going to coalesce into something that's implementable, at least as step one? So the second article I'd like to share comes from GreenBiz from June 1st, 2020, called Is Sustainability Undergoing a Pandemic Pause? So Joel McCower, the mustache-adorned chairman of GreenBiz, and of course, Scott, podcast guest on episode 30 on green finance.
You think we have bad jokes. This guy's just full of them.
Joel McCower, in this article, investigates whether or not the sustainability field has been able to withstand the economic volatility during the coronavirus. The short answer, despite many headlines suggesting the contrary, sustainability is actually alive and well. Joel describes, for the first time, corporate sustainability professionals are on the bus instead of being thrown under it, which is, of course, far more comfortable. But it's to say that sustainability has become so ingrained in company strategy and operations that it's not going to go anywhere. Joel goes on to highlight some of his favorite headlines from major companies over the past 2 months to drive this point home. So some of the ones that stood out to me were, number one, Microsoft committed to protect more land than it operates on globally by 2025. Citigroup to halt all financing for thermal coal mining by 2030. And Google to stop making AI tools for oil and gas extraction. So Joel's highlighting these headlines to say, look, coronavirus is happening, but so is a lot of sustainability in lockstep. Lastly, Joel summarizes the 5 reasons why sustainability is still going strong within the private sector amid this admittedly just terrifying time. I'm not going to spoil it for you, listeners. I encourage you to give the article a read. Again, it's called Is Sustainability Undergoing a Pandemic Pause by GreenBiz. So,
okay, you're making the listeners work for it, huh?
You just got to tease them, keep them interested.
Yeah, no, and I think the part of the argument is that these companies, yes, they're really focused on how to respond to this virus, but the idea is if we make these progress toward these sustainability goals, you'll have more resilient companies, and that if something like this were to happen again, you could weather it better. Exactly.
And it's that kind of, it's trying to go against that notion of, okay, well, sustainability as a field could be considered kind of fluffy. So when things get real, like it's kind of one of those first things that you can cut easily. Well, actually, that's not the case. And so I think that's actually a invigorating article to read during these tough times. So, Scott, I know in school when you would get a ton of reading, actually you're a lawyer, so I'm not sure if this actually even applies to you, but the next articles I'm going to share are not articles, they're actually videos. So the question is...
Lawyers like videos too, Jay.
Right, okay, so then maybe, Scott, you can relate, right? So like, how awesome was it when you're in class and your teachers give you, like wheel in that big TV in front of the classroom or assign you some kind of video or movie to watch for homework? Well, listeners, you're welcome. These videos I'm going to share actually tie back into the beginning of the episode on racial justice, which I just found, of course, extremely topical and very, very important. So my first recommendation is if you did not catch Trevor Noah's unscripted breakdown of, number 1, the killing of George Floyd, number 2, the protests in Minneapolis, number 3, the dominoes of racial injustice and police brutality, and then number 4, how the contract between society and Black Americans has been broken over and over again, definitely give this video a watch. So, of course, Scott, as we discussed at the top of the show, sustainability and racial justice are inextricably linked. And to me, Trevor has an amazing way, just from the comfort of his bed, really, I think he's just propped up on his bed, just connecting the dots that many of us, myself included, have missed. So, listeners, I encourage you guys to check this out on The Daily Show's YouTube and Instagram channels from May 29th, 2020. Scott, have you caught this one?
I honestly haven't, but I have to say that when Jon Stewart left, I was like, oh, Trevor Noah, he's kind of funny, but I feel like he's really found his voice. For what it's worth, I think that's what I think, and I really enjoy listening to him recently. And I've also been meaning to listen to his book. His audio. I want to listen to it as an audiobook. So it's like autobiography, right?
Yeah, no, I think actually my girlfriend's read it. It says great things about him growing up in apartheid South Africa. Right. And that background, of course, now at the helm of The Daily Show during all of this that's happening gives him, number one, a fantastic perspective, but then you just couple that with his just eloquence in speech, and you've got a great video. I think it's about 18 minutes, but well worth it.
Okay.
So then, Scott, your homework and listeners' second piece of homework as it pertains to videos is a new web series by a guy named Emmanuel Acho. The series is called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And it's exactly what it sounds like. A much needed series of intentionally awkward dialogues to lay bare the racist foundations that our society is based upon. So one of my favorite episodes of this web series involved Matthew McConaughey as a guest on the show. And he's asking Emmanuel these thought-provoking questions that I think many white people are wondering but haven't really had a chance to ask. And what I like about it is that Matthew's asking these questions without the need to really respond to them. So he's asking these questions, listening to Emmanuel's responses, and then just saying things like heard, and that's it. Just acknowledging and fundamentally just listening to Emmanuel's answers that are crucial for him to hear and everyone else that's listening to hear. So listeners, I encourage you to check that out. That's also on YouTube or Instagram TV, I believe, and really probably anywhere else around social media. You can search Emmanuel Acho. His last name is spelled A-C-H-O, or simply search Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, and you will find it.
Wow. I hadn't heard of this one either, Jay. I also hadn't heard of Instagram TV. That's a thing.
Yo, man, Scott, yes, Instagram TV is a thing. And actually, fun fact, I mean, this guy, Emmanuel is just this just huge, muscular, jacked guy. And so really? I searched for him. I was like, how have I, he's such a distinctive guy. Like, how have I not seen him before? It turns out I had seen him. He used to be a pro football player for the Philadelphia Eagles. So he had really? Looked vaguely familiar, and now he's progressing incredibly important conversations and distributing them for anyone out there.
Is it always with famous people, or just Matthew McConaughey is one of them?
No, I think he was maybe the first celebrity. The first few, it's just Emmanuel just sitting down, looking at the camera, and just reading questions and answering it. It's powerful because it's so candid. And then I do think there have been others with celebrities. I don't know if you watch, I don't know what the name of their show is, but it's Chip and Joanna Gaines. They have a house flipping show in Texas. But it was cool because the couple came on and they brought their 5 kids. And it drives the point home of look, a lot of racism is, what does he say? It is caught, not taught, meaning it's you observe it and it's not necessarily something that's told to you. So the action of bringing the kids there, I think spoke a lot about how we need to have this conversation, just not just adult to adult, but recognize that it's everywhere and involve everyone in it.
Yeah, I've been listening to, I actually just did a book club with my girlfriend and some of our friends around reading White Fragility. Yeah. And one of the things they talk about in this book is, and I don't know if you've been in this scenario where she gives the scenario of, let's say there's a kid with her parent in a grocery store. And the kid says something like, hey, Mom, there's a black man over there, and says something about the black person. And then the parent will say, don't say he's black or she's black. And it's like, well, why are you shushing the person? If the kid said, oh, that person's fat or something else, maybe there'd be some giggling and stuff, but not so much shushing. Yeah. And so to your point, just how we interact with children and how they'll pick up on those things. So it is a crucial thing to think about.
Absolutely. So Scott, that concludes my video portion of the homework here. So let's I
hope they all took notes.
I hope so.
We'll put it online.
There you go. Listeners, we took the notes for you. All right. So right after this quick break, Scott, we are going to come back and listen to your articles. Here we go.
Support for Sustainability Defined comes from NLX, the makers of JuiceBox, the best-selling electric car home charging station. The JuiceBox can charge an EV up to 13 times faster than other home charging stations. JuiceBox's smart charging Wi-Fi features also help drivers charge with the cheapest and cleanest energy available. Schedule car charging when electricity rates are lower, or with JuiceNet Green software, charge with the cleanest energy on the grid. Sync your EV charging to times when solar and wind power are at maximum production and fossil fuel power sources are at a minimum. More online at juiceboxstore.com.
Brew Doctor Kombucha stands apart as a kombucha company steeped in tea heritage and commitment to using business as a force for good. The company takes inspiration from its custom tea blends, making deliciously refreshing, authentic kombucha with a difference you can taste. During these unprecedented times, Brew Doctor has partnered with distilleries to transform the alcohol they remove from their kombucha during the creation process into hand sanitizer. So far, they've donated over 500 gallons of hand sanitizer to nonprofits who need it and expect to donate thousands more. Brew Doctor's mission is to help people discover how good tea and kombucha can be, referring not only to its quality approach, but to the company's commitment to its communities, its people, and the planet. Brew Doctor Kombucha is proud to be the first national kombucha company to become both carbon neutral and a certified B Corporation. Check out Brew Doctor Kombucha, that's brewdrkombucha.com to learn more. All right, so Scott,
Okay.
let's hear what you'd like to share.
Okay, so Jay, I looked back at my weekly Monday sustainability posts on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I found some good ones. All right, so the first one is titled Michigan Dam Disaster, an example of what could happen in other communities. So this is a Washington Post article, May 22nd, 2020. So in Midland, Michigan, I don't know if you caught this, Jay, 11,000 residents had to evacuate when a dam broke. There was lots of property damage, but this is the latest dam break in a series that is likely to continue given the state of dams in the United States and as more extreme weather events occur due to climate change. So let's zoom out a little bit and talk dams. So the American Society of Civil Engineers gives the United States' 95,000 dams a D. This is for a variety of reasons. One, they're old. Their average age is 56. These old dams were designed to generate energy, but now they're past their lifespans, and they were not built to withstand the intensity of today's rain events. There are 2,000 dams of those 95,000 that have been designated as high hazard because of the potential for their failure to result in the loss of life. Now, here's a wrinkle to this whole thing. 75% of dams in the United States are privately owned. And if those dams lose their federal licensing, then there's no revenue from the power generation and there's no clear mechanism to pay for the needed repairs. So what can we do? Well, American Rivers is a nonprofit that says that about 1,700 dams so far have been removed because they're no longer useful, and that can help with habitat restoration. But of course, that's a fraction of the 95,000 total that are out there. And another unfortunate thing is that FEMA has given just $10 million over the past years to help the United States, the various states, with dam removal, which that $10 million is a fraction of the billions we need for repairs or removing these dams. Now, not covered in the Washington Post article, but important to note is that dams, like globally, have been disastrous for many indigenous people. Worldwide, reservoirs created by dams are estimated to have a combined storage capacity of 10,000 cubic meters, equal to 5 times the volume of water in all the rivers in the world. That one kind of blew my mind. More than 400,000 square kilometers, an area equivalent to the size of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, and Pennsylvania, have been inundated by these reservoirs worldwide, holding all that water. This is a lot of former land now covered with water, and it also disrupts fisheries and other ecosystem services that people have depended on for hundreds of years. A conservative estimate that I saw of the number of people displaced by dams in the past 50 years is 50 to 60 million people, the vast majority of whom have been poor and politically powerless.
Wow. Well, okay, first, and this joke, of course, has to be made, but this is a damn disaster.
It's damning, this whole report.
But I mean, Scott, on top of those mind-popping stats, I'm thinking of the episode we did with Will Sarney on water infrastructure, which was a similar story, which is like we have dated infrastructure that is nearing the end of its useful life. And clearly with these dams having real implications, like immediate implications for people that, again, are more disadvantaged than others that are maybe located in safer areas. It's one of those slow-moving issues that I'm glad you're calling attention to, because clearly it's already starting to become a real issue.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and as our federal debt continues to balloon, as states and cities look for places to cut, this is the kind of stuff they're cutting.
Yeah.
Infrastructure projects that they're like, yeah, we'll do it in 5 years. We'll do it 10 years. And it needs to be done now. The longer we wait on these sort of things, the more expensive they become. Mm-hmm. So, okay, next thing is a podcast, not an article. It's called Wipeout from 99% Invisible, April 7th, 2020. This is kind of a coronavirus special here, this one. So 70% of the world doesn't use toilet paper. And Americans, though, we use 28 pounds, 141 rolls of toilet paper a year per person, which is why Americans are 4% of global population, but we account for 20% of toilet paper consumption.
Wow.
Now, let's talk the history of toilet paper. It's a relatively new thing. For most of human existence, people used other items, rocks, shells, moss, water. The Romans, they had a sponge on a stick that sat in a pail of water within the communal bathrooms. The earliest recording of paper for cleaning your rear is about 500 or so. It didn't really take off for use with a toilet until the later part of the 19th century. So, like I said, recent stuff. Now, sadly, toilet paper is often sourced in not so sustainable ways. The Natural Resources Defense Council published a report last year titled Issue with Tissue. You got to have good titles for these things, showing leading brands incorporate no recycled content and often rely on ancient trees from Canada's boreal forest.
Scott, it's funny. I think I caught this episode. In this episode, do they also go and interview all these people that are waiting in their cars for miles and miles to drive not to a grocery store, but to line up at a toilet paper distributor to pick up their TP because of this just the weirdest spike in demand for coronavirus? It's fascinating, and it's I think they said that the real spike in toilet paper usage was more of a marketing feat, that someone was able to market it in such a way that Americans found it absolutely necessary. Clearly that's the case, and they've taken it to extreme lengths. I mean, 4% of global population and 20% of TP consumption is God, it's just hard to wrap your mind around.
I think it was framed as like a health thing, but studies show that it's not necessarily all that helpful. You know, to be candid, Jay, and now all the listeners will know, I have a bidet, so you can use water, and it's great. I think it's actually more effective. Not to mention you're saving on the great using any paper or less paper by having that.
Nice. Well, Scott, I can't say I have the bidet here, but this might be my inspiration.
All right. So the next one is titled New Jersey to Teach Climate Change to its 1.4 million students. I saw this in a daily newsletter I subscribe to called Our Daily Planet. Highly recommend it. It's from June 9th, 2020. Now, if you can believe it, New Jersey is the first state to incorporate climate change in its K-12 curriculum. This is largely thanks to a push from New Jersey's First Lady, Tammy Murphy. The hope is that other states will follow. So let's talk about people's opinions around teaching climate change. So last year, an NPR/Ipsos poll found 80% of parents think climate change should be taught in the classroom, but at the same time, many teachers don't have the resources to teach it, and or they're afraid to tackle a, sadly, politically sensitive subject. Now, my hope is that the curriculum in New Jersey that they're putting together, it includes discussing not only the cause of climate change, but its potential effects, as well as how those effects are expected to disproportionately affect people of color.
Scott, I can't say I knew that New Jersey was just the first state to actually incorporate this. It's one of those things that's like, you know, I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, but I would have hoped that other states had already gotten there. But at the same time, someone's got to do it first. So kudos to Tammy Murphy in New Jersey for being the ones to take that first step.
For sure. And now we got to provide the resources to make it easy for teachers.
Hey, teachers, want to use a podcast in your lesson plan? We've
That's
got
right.
one for you.
We are working with Parker to provide educational resources on our website, right, Jay?
That's right. Scott, it's cool. I think it's a testament to the show. We're on course curriculum now at, we're on at Penn State University, University of South Carolina, University of Memphis, and hopefully others that we're not even aware about. But I think it's great if we can position something that can be used in this context. Fantastic.
For sure. Okay, so the last one I've got, it's called Dumped Milk, Smashed Eggs, Plowed Vegetables, Food Waste of the Pandemic. This is in the New York Times, April 11th, 2020. So with the coronavirus upending what and where we buy our food, the result has been a significant amount of food loss at the farm level. When this article was written in April, one Idaho farmer was burying 1 million pounds of onions, a single chicken processor was smashing 750,000 unhatched eggs a week, and the Dairy Farmers of America, the nation's largest dairy cooperative, said farmers were dumping 3.7 million gallons of milk each day. So why the waste? Well, there were only so many volunteers to pick up the harvest from farms to donate it. There's only so much fridge space available. And many farms are equipped to serve commercial outlets. They're not equipped to package their product for sale at the consumer retail level. This is particularly distressing as people lose their jobs and they need food. We're hearing of long lines at food pantries. So what's happened lately since that April article I mentioned? There's been a bunch of other articles written. You can Google this. But a couple things to note is that USDA, the Department of Agriculture, has made several $billion available to pay for the surplus product and get it to those in need. Also, grassroots efforts have sprung up, like FarmLink, to pay for access product and then get it to food banks that can then distribute it.
I'm made to think of two things here, Scott. Number one, of course, just how tragic it is to envision those stats you mentioned, like someone literally burying onions or smashing eggs. Meanwhile,
and on that scale,
and you've got people that are literally hungry on the streets is one. And then number two, it makes me think of just how fine-tuned so many of these supply chains are in a way that might not necessarily make them resilient, like a lot of us are talking about, right? So it's like if you have disruptions from certain very specific types of clients as a farm, and suddenly that system loses its footing, you have all this waste. Well, I guess I'm thankful that this issue is being exposed so that people can think about that. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty daunting stuff right there.
Yeah, and the farmers are also in a tough place now because it's like, well, what if things return to normal at the next harvest? I want to make sure to be able to serve the commercial clients.
Right.
Or what if they're like they are now? Then I don't want to get stuck with stuff I'm going to have to throw out again. So, tough situation all around.
Very. All right, so Scott, the third and final element of Atypical episode number 1 is listener voicemails. So, listeners, here's a little bit of context. Scott and I have been getting some emails for years now that are just fantastic, of listeners writing in to say, hey, your podcast was informative for me here. I really appreciated what you guys did in this episode. I took X or Y action as a result. And so we thought these messages are so cool, but let's give the listeners the chance to actually share their stories themselves. So regular listeners over the last several episodes or so, you've heard us calling for voicemails saying, hey, call our Google Voice number and share your story with us. We've had some folks do that, and so we're going to hear them coming up. So Scott, let's talk about some detail of what these voicemails are going to share.
Yeah, so basically it's a few voicemails from listeners of the podcast explaining what they heard and then how they acted, how it changed the way they went about their studies or their jobs or something else. So we hope you enjoy it. And those listeners listening to the show right now, you can call in too. Our Google Voice number, it's 202-670-7357. That's 202-670-7357. Tell us your name, where you're from, what you listened to, and then how you acted based on what you listened to. And then we're going to gather all these, and we're going to pick a few to put on our next Atypical episode. So we hope you enjoy these.
Hey guys, guys. My name's Angela Scafidi, and I'm a rising senior in college. I've been a regular listener for the past couple months, and after hearing the Sustainable Beer episode, I was blown away by all the cool work that Katie Wallace does at New Belgian. I would have never considered how to make ordinary industries more sustainable, and it led me to take more CSR-related classes during my final 2 years. Thank you, guys.
Hey, this is Dane Lennon. I live in Seattle, Washington, and I recently watched episode 48 with Scott and Jay. Personally, since I graduated college from Western Washington University with a degree in sustainable business, I've had a lot of difficulty with figuring out exactly what I want to do with my degree. There's 3 or 4 facets that I think are interesting, but when Scott was talking about meeting with the professional who asked him what he wanted to do, and he said, well, this is the field I want to work in, but I don't know exactly what I want to do. I have felt the exact same way about my sustainability journey, and it's honestly just really nice to hear someone else has struggled with the same issues that I have and has also learned from them and moved on. So since listening to this episode, I've been looking at getting LCA or LEED certified and actually doing it. Due to quarantine, we have a lot of time to sit at home and stare at our computers, but I don't know, just hearing that enthusiasm from Scott and Jay really has pumped me up about this, and I just want to say thank you, so I appreciate it. Take care.
My name is Asmara Kazmi. I'm originally from Brooklyn, but now reside in the UK. I was working on an article regarding circularity in NHS supply chains when I heard the aptly timed episode on hospitals and sustainability. I really appreciated the resources referred to in this episode, especially the reference to Practice Green Health's reports, as this opened an entirely new avenue of exploration, which has contributed greatly to my overall case. Additionally, the triple wins from the rooftop farm at the Boston Medical Center was an incredibly inspiring example. It led me to consider using the savings and benefits on an individual hospital level to help build the business case for the kind of systemic changes my publications will suggest. I started out with just a blog post that applied lessons of biomimicry to the hospital supply chain, and ended up with a more informed article that addresses multiple facets of a complex problem. As always, it is a joy to discover all the things I don't know through Sustainability Defined. It keeps me constantly checking my assumptions and looking for innovative solutions. The beautiful thing is, the learning doesn't stop at the podcast. For me, the podcast gives a platform to explore new spaces more effectively, all within the context of sustainability. A big thank you, as always, to Scott and Jay.
Hello, Jay and Scott. My name is Kalavet Ngida. I'm a senior at the University of Washington School of Oceanography. I'm from Seattle, Washington. I just gave a call to say that I'm really happy with your podcast. I just want to give you guys a thumbs up on your Vacant to Vibrant episode. It gave me quite a lot of things to think about, and I learned so much. I've gotten to work right away for summer on my front lawn, planting some trees, and I really am planning to use a leaf-based fertilizer to create more permeability, to collect more storm water and rainwater, since Seattle is a pretty rainy city. But yeah, I really like your episodes, and I really like your podcast. I'm a sustainability geek, and it's really tough to find podcasts out there that are relatable nowadays. But I just want to give you guys a thumbs up, and you guys rock. Have a great day.
All right, Scott, we have reached the end of this atypical episode. Usually I wrap this up with a joke. This atypical episode, I'm going to be dead serious. The episode's over.
Just as funny.
Just more to the point.
Yeah. All right. So to the point, let's thank some people. We want to thank my mom, Adrian Breen, and Parker. well, Shannon Parker, but she goes by Parker.
Right.
So we want to thank both of them for collecting resources for us to make those available to you all. And we also want to thank Matt Aarons, who continues to be our social media maven and post great things to engage with you all.
We'd also like to thank all of you listeners who called in and shared your stories with the show. We're super excited to be able to share those and look forward to the next batch of listeners calling in to do the exact same thing. And again, that number is 202-670-7357. 202-670-7357 to call and leave your message for the next time we play these on the show. Also, thanks to Square Peg, Round Hole, and Potions for the music we use in the episode. And of course, do not forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Of course, the reviews you can leave are specific to iTunes and Apple Podcasts. And Scott, I believe you have one to share.
I do, Jay. This is one of my favorite parts of my side hustle here is reading these reviews. So we've got one from OzKaz921 from May 29th, 2020. Here's what he says. Scott and Jay are the most dynamic duo since PB and J.
Yes.
You'll be entertained, educated, and empowered to go on your own sustainability journey. I've learned a lot from the episodes and even more once I started exploring the resources they mention. This podcast is a must for anyone looking to become a more informed member of society. In the area of misinformation, good sources are indispensable. As far as sources and jokes go, these guys are the best. OzKaz.
That's
921.
Scott, we've certainly been flattered with these, and it continues to be called the best duo since PB&J.
Wow.
I'm going to carry that one.
That's
with
a good sandwich.
That's, arguably unbeatable.
Peanut butter and banana is actually my favorite.
Throw on some honey there as well. But hey, are you a grape jelly purist, or do you go like strawberry or something crazy?
No, I don't really have strong opinions on the jam, but it's got to be jam. I want to see the fruit in there.
Yes, I can agree with that. 100%.
All right. On that note of agreement, Jay, I think that about does it. You all stay sustainable out there. I'm Scott Breen.
And I'm Jay Siegel. We will see you next time.